Well, to start it off, I want to follow what David was saying. I didn't grow up in downtown, but my parents met when they were living at the Continental Hotel, which is one of the few places left. My dad was running the Walgreens in 9th and Nicollet. I was taught to take the bus. I took the bus down to the YMCA. Every Saturday we'd walk around town, and downtown has been where I've worked almost my entire career. To me, it is a mission. And I want to take you back to something. We began the report with this example, but it's relevant where we are right now. So I want to take you back to the mid-'80s. I can't remember exactly what year, 85, 86, somewhere in there. I was working at the Downtown Council, and up at the very top of the IDS, I took a visitor from out of town with a view somewhat like this. And I was so proud of our downtown. And he walked to the window and he looked over here, and then he walked over here, and then we went over there where the Metrodome was, and he looked back and he said, "Where is it?" Which was one of the most deflating comments ever. But if you think about it right now, that building wasn't here, that building wasn't here, that building wasn't here. Those were a bunch of abandoned warehouses that seemed really scary. It was where my godfather had his artificial limb embrace store. He was one of the few people over there. There was no Twins Stadium there, no parking ramps over there. The river was all railroad tracks. There were parking lots around the Metrodome. The Loring Park neighborhood wasn't a neighborhood, it was a couple of buildings over there. I say all of this because we need to stop this defeatist idea that the great days of downtown are over. Downtown now is dramatically bigger, dramatically more diverse, has phenomenally more resources. All those theaters on Hennepin that are lit up, every one of them was dark at that time. So the fact of the matter is, when we talk about downtown, we have to recognize it is no longer 6 blocks. It was a very vibrant 6 blocks with probably the best department store in America. We miss that, no doubt about it. But the fact of the matter is, no great city you go to, you walk 6 blocks and turn around and walk 6 more. We now have, in the report we talked about the villages of downtown. When we talk about downtown, we get to celebrate the success of the river, the North Loop, East Town, Loring, Central, the entire connective tissue of all of that. And so first off, whenever anybody says to you, no one goes downtown, laugh in their face and say they do. But we need to do more, especially at a moment like this that's an inflection about how work is and many other things. So clearly, like any city in America, any business core in America, we need to rethink that. And the report that David and Beth and Sarah wrote really started with the idea that we want to have the central business district especially move from being a monoculture 9 to 5 to a multiculture many, many hours of the day where people live and work and play and others. This isn't new. Every part surrounding the central business district has built its success on that model. David's super modest. He, more than any other single individual, is the person who really helped propel the North Loop where it went. And it's very true, David. You can ignore that, but it is true. And when you look at that, it is really using a model of the one thing we can go back to is when my parents lived and worked downtown. And as David was raising his family on that, that's a 24-hour experience. So this idea of from monoculture to multiculture, from 9 to 5 to 24 hours, is the core of what we're talking about. This idea of the villages of downtown is one that we really want to celebrate. So that's at the first line top of this. The report covered many big issues: how we convert office towers to housing, how we do multiple other issues of concentrating this and that use downtown. But I want to have them dig into a couple key areas in that. First off, so I wonder if Beth, you could talk about the issue that was, we did a series before this at Walker Arts Center called Abundant Cities, where we brought in artists and multiple different voices for a more expansive conversation. And they really began to land the issue of who is downtown? And I wonder if, Beth, you could talk about that for a minute.
Sure, absolutely. So as R.T. said, we did this speaker series at the Walker, and there were a number of people that were working on projects, innovative, fantastic development and community-based project all across the U.S. And the single most recurring theme was that the old paradigm of how things get done is changing. And our downtown and many other downtowns have been focused on basically the white office worker. And if we are going to convert to a lively, vibrant, 24/7 ecosystem that includes residents and workers of all kinds, people of all generations, we have to include those people in the planning. And you can't do it with one or two meetings. You have to do it in a very authentic way. So one of the primary things that we call for in that report, in the report that we issued, is to broaden the voices that are brought into the conversation of what downtown means and what it should be. I think that question that you just said that the Walker raised, who is downtown? Because a city isn't its physical spaces. That's what supports the community that grows there. And you all know when you go to a city and it feels like there's a community there, it feels like people care about each other. And even if they aren't conversing, they are integrating and colliding with each other in really human ways. That's what we need to engender here. The reason that it feels so vacuous in the central business district is because the people aren't there. I don't want to say there's nothing wrong with the infrastructure. We sure can make some improvements that make it more friendly. But there's no one there. And why is there no one there? Because there's no one there. And people don't feel, many of the historically ignored and underheard voices don't feel like there's a place for them there. But the way that we're going to change that is by doubling down on our Minnesotan civic engagement, on our sense of volunteerism, and welcoming others into the conversation.
So I want to return back to this in a second when we call on Beth's experience in developing the commons and public space and how Nicollet Mall especially plays that role. But I want David to pick up on one of the themes, which is a common theme. By the way, Beth, I didn't mean to laugh when I sat down. I can't figure out how to sit here without spinning. So I'm just going to kind of do this, okay? Yeah. So I want to ask David to pick up on this topic of office buildings being converted to housing. We hear this lots of places, and it's really exciting. And the thing to remember is, first off, we've got a great office population. I'm part of that. We don't want to throw that away. That remains. And not every building can be converted to housing. So David, give us an overview of how that works.
Sure. And happy to, R.T. And also let me just remind all of us, I'm sure many of you have read these same things in the paper, and many of you know much more about this than I do, right? The downtown central business district in Minneapolis is a huge percentage of the revenue in the form of property taxes that our local government, both the city and the county and others, rely on for the programs that we can fight about whether they're good programs, bad programs, effective, not effective, right? But like government is used to that revenue, and when tenants downsize or move out, I feel like other people should be making this speech, when tenants downsize or move out, a smart office building owner is going to say, my building's not worth as much, I won't pay as many taxes. And then those taxes are going to come from somewhere probably, and will get distributed across residents who will pay at a higher rate, right? So like, it's a problem for all of us, even if your only lens on it is your pocketbook, your wallet, however you're supposed to say that today. So, office buildings. Not every office building can or should be converted to residential, but some could, right? So like I like to bring the the thought to it and say to people when we're talking, right? Like this is not the universal cure-all, right? If your office building is only half full, that's not necessarily the same as you should get rid of your tenants and turn it into an apartment building or move them to one part and convert part of it, right? There's an evaluation that can be done. You've read in the paper, I'll share with you that I'm part of a group that is working with local property owners and sometimes with lenders who find themselves unhappily owning an office building because the owner has said, don't want it anymore, here you go, to evaluate from a physical standpoint, a potential financing standpoint, a market standpoint, all kinds of ways, whether a specific office building is a good candidate for conversion, okay? There's also, it's worth saying, from a financing perspective, there's an effort underway being led by a group called Rethos, which used to be the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota, somebody tell me if I have that wrong, advocating at the state legislature for a state tax credit to incent and make more possible the conversion of a property from office or something else to something else, probably to housing, right? So there are different efforts to evaluate and to help advocate for public assistance to pay for conversions of some of the buildings. Won't be all, and it affects us all, right? Even if you don't live downtown but live in the city, and who cares, right? Your property tax bill or someone's property tax bill is directly affected by what happens here.
And those property taxes aren't just for Minneapolis, right? Those taxes fuel the county, county-wide, right? And it's a very significant issue.
Yep.
So let's turn to a couple other parts of the drivers for downtown vibrancy. One of the things that has been an enormous increase over the past couple decades is the attractions that we have downtown that bring people here. Thousands and thousands of people are coming here weekly, daily sometimes, for Vikings, Timberwolves, Lynx, Twins, the Hennepin Theaters, the Guthrie, Orchestra Hall, the Dakota, extraordinary number of attractions. We don't believe right now we are getting the length of stay we should get. Come to the game and leave, come to the attraction and leave. So there's great opportunity to do more of that. So a couple things are underway. A couple I can't really go public with, but there's discussion about several attractions that could be in the core on that. But one of the key parts of this is the most logical place for people to come together is actually the spine of downtown, which is Nicollet Mall. Now, if you actually think about Nicollet Mall and why it is where it is and why there's been such focus, it was the center of this 6-block downtown we had. Now, if you really, really look at where the center of downtown is, it shifted a little bit. Back when I was mayor, it would have been like 15 years ago, I gave a speech called Washington Boulevard that said to people, pay attention to Washington Avenue. It's the connection between the University of Minnesota and what's happening on the river and what's happening on the North Loop. And Washington Avenue could be a grand boulevard, and people totally laughed me out of the room. I was wrong about many things. I was right about Washington Boulevard. I'm also right about the fact that the historical significance and the concentration that remains on Nicollet is really strong. If you really take what is the 100% corner of downtown, which used to be 7th and Nicollet, you could probably argue it's where Hennepin, Washington, Nicollet, and the river come together. It's why we as the Minneapolis Foundation helped start the Taste of Minnesota last summer to show that there could be a gathering there. It's why we helped fund the Ice Bar as part of Great Northern this year. But Nicollet really needs some significant rethinking. One of the things that is most important about that is that when we went out to get the money to redo Nicollet the last time, the case that we, and I certainly made at the legislature, was Minneapolis doesn't have parks in the city. We are a city and a park. The parks define the city. Every other city is the opposite way around. So this city and a park needs a park in the city. The vision for this Nicollet Mall was originally an extraordinarily green street. We went to the High Line in New York. We hired the architect who did that. I walked Nicollet Mall with that architect. We talked about how this was going to be a green street. But one of the things that was important about the High Line in New York that we did not put in place was the idea was there was a conservancy of people who helped raise dollars to green that street. There's also, and Beth, who project managed a good chunk of this, will tell you the trees are planted pretty much where they can be because there's so much stuff under the ground. But there are multiple ways to green a street. Beyond that, the money ran out, the conservancy never happened. How we get to the greener street, there's a lot of need to discuss right now, but that is really one of the goals. There's a big movement right now to take buses off Nicollet. I love buses, I ride buses. However, the federal government gave us a huge grant a number of years ago to remake Marquette and 2nd to handle all of the buses. The infrastructure is there, and we need to get the Metropolitan Council to complete the work and actually take buses off Nicollet. Now I want to turn to both David and Beth and talk about, Beth, from the perspective of what you did with the Commons in this. What do we need to know about how to manage that? And David, from the perspective, can you talk about how we connect that, especially to the river?
Do you want to?
No, you go for it.
Okay.
Give her a minute, because I gave her a pretty tough one.
I think, R.T., let me just clarify. You're talking about activating it,
Yeah.
about drawing people there, and what
Yeah.
is it that creates
Yeah, the
that
management
community?
structure you put in place at the Commons.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just talk for a minute about the Commons. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Commons is the park outside US Bank Stadium. It is a beautiful park and a tremendous asset that I think even still today is largely unknown by a lot of people that work in downtown. And they sure don't know that it's called the Commons, which is fine. That park was created along with a conservancy to run it. And the job of that conservancy was to continue to raise money to not only take care of the park to a beautiful standard, but also to program it. And I think we've all been to places in other parts of the country where there is programming. And that is, a story time for kids at noon, that's a dog meetup, that's, when Green Minneapolis was managing the Commons, we did some wonderful large events. We had the Super Eid Festival with 5,500 people of Somali heritage there celebrating that holiday. And that takes a lot of effort and money and coordination. But it pays off in dividends in that you create community, and then that in turn engenders place attachment, which in turn engenders more events, more activation, and now the people are there, which makes you want to come and be there, because you want to be where it's fun people watching. So Nicollet Mall does not have a conservancy. What it has is the Downtown Improvement District taking care of it. And everyone at the Downtown Improvement District is working tirelessly to keep it clean, to keep it safe, and to keep it beautiful. And the work they do is remarkable for the funding that they have. In order to have a beautiful green pedestrian street, you have to have enough money to take care of plants. I don't know how many of you have a yard, and if you're a gardener, you know how much work and how much money it takes to keep it looking beautiful. And in order to create the green street, I think the two things are needed. One, adequate funding for maintenance, and then also the engagement of the property owners to consider it their front yard and to beautify it like it is their front yard. I think another thing that would really help, the buses would help a lot, but they aren't they're the perceived limiter, but I don't actually think they are the limiter. I think a limiter that we could lean into is creating more storefronts on the mall, more opportunities for delight and discovery. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Chameleon Shops. That's a program run by the Downtown Improvement District. It's a entrepreneurship, mentorship program where entrepreneurs are given a space in downtown to pilot and prototype their retail. And if there were a number of small shops like that, think how much fun it would be to walk down Nicollet Mall.
So Beth, I want to
Yep.
we'll get some
Can
time
I
for
say one more
questions.
thing
Go.
before I
Yep.
forget it? And that is sidewalk cafes. How often are you in another city and you're like, I don't know where I am, and then you see colorful umbrellas over there, like, oh yeah, let's go see what's happening over there. So sidewalk cafes, leaning hard into that.
But before I turn it to David, and I just want to give you a warning, Tom, after David, I want to see if I could call on you, having just written a book on post-pandemic cities, to give us a top line on it. To pivot from Beth to David, I just want to say, greening Nicollet is important, so is turning it into a winter street. So if there's one thing people in this room could help make happen, we are doing a big effort that next winter it will become America's winter street. That from the Holiday through Great Northern, like we did in the Super Bowl, we know how to do this, folks, to take over the street. The Ice Bar was a huge success. Dayton's Marketplace did $1.5 million this holiday season, which was an astonishing number. So we want that to be a street that is a green and snowy street.
With an ice rink, maybe?
Absolutely.
No? Oh,
No
I don't know.
ice
Yes.
please.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Okay,
We'll debate that.
so-
Go
We'll
ahead,
fight
David.
over that.
Yes.
Wow. Ask about that and we'll see what happens.
Yes.
So when you follow those umbrellas and they're taking you towards, I don't know what, but like where Nicollet goes like this down at Washington that R.T. was talking about, like there it ends, right? That's a pretty recognizable intersection and you know where you are. But as somebody who used to show out-of-town visitors around a lot, they'd say, are you kidding me? The Mississippi is another however much, eighth of a mile in that direction, right? So the most recent time that I had a chance to ask the United States Postal Service, they were not interested in selling just the parking ramp, right? So picture it like down there by blocking the access to the river. They said somebody would have to buy the entire thing, including the whole beautiful building, right? So just if you've ever heard somebody say, well, you need to knock down the post office, no one's ever talking about that. We're talking about the ugly, pebbly parking ramp that blocks access as a pedestrian to the riverfront. And it'd be amazing, right, if that were magically gone and we had money to hire a fantastic design firm and install something that you could sit on and watch a show or see the river or just get there. That'd be great, right? No one's talking about getting rid of the post office. They're in a position to drive a hard bargain because, of course, we've had it in the newspaper umpty-ump times that like, gotta have it, gotta have it. Guess what? They see us coming. But that is just one idea. We are hardly the originators in the report of the idea, hey, we should get the city or somebody's hands on the post office, demolish that part, and like, we're all done here. We can't take credit for that. It's a super, it's an idea that grabs a hold of people once they hear about it. So if we're putting out pleas for like, please be involved with that, like, please be involved with that. That'd be fun.
So there are a lot of smart people in this room. I want to open it up for questions and comments, but I want to start that by turning to Tom Fisher from the University of Minnesota, who has a long, long history of doing lots of great things, but he's just finished a book whose title he's going to give us. And Tom, can you start our conversation here with just a couple of things that you think should be on our mind?
Sure. So I've long been interested in the impact that pandemics have on cities. I finished a book 2 years ago called The Post-Pandemic World. And we shouldn't lose heart. The kinds of things we're going through right now has happened several times before with cities. So after the 1854 pandemic, the cholera pandemic, it really transformed cities. We started to have indoor plumbing, sanitary sewers, water utilities, and it basically allowed big cities to emerge because we paid attention to water. After the 1918 flu pandemic, it led everyone to want their own automobile, their own single-family house, and we suburbanized our cities as a result of that pandemic, right? So pandemics have these huge long-term effects on cities. Cities don't die, they just change. And now we're in another one of those cycles of change, right? And this change is probably going to be some rebalancing of what we do physically and remotely, what we do in person and what we do digitally. Really, for the first time in human history, we realized we could have everything delivered either to our door or our device. We didn't have to leave our home, right? That's never happened before in human history, right? So why come downtown? Why would we come to a place? So the book is really about how we have to make places immersive experiences, unique things that you can't get online, right? So stores have to be these places that are incredible experiences, not just places to buy stuff. You know, the downtown has to be curated. There's this whole new field called public curation, which is about, you know, making sure there's lots of things happening all the time. So this is the transformation that's going on. The other thing I talk about is the paradox is even as pandemics accelerate us into the future, they also sometimes remind us of things we used to do. So downtowns used to be places where people worked, lived, and made things. And that's where we're going. We are going back to downtowns being a place to live, work, and also make things. You might be doing it with 3D printing and CNC fabrication, but we're in some ways going back to what we used to do, being digitally enhanced, even as we've been accelerated forward. So we shouldn't lose heart. This is exactly the conversation we should be having, and every downtown in the world needs to be having this conversation now also.
So as I kick off the questioning, I do want to just give a little bit of history. I was a kid who grew up watching downtown, family stuff, all that, was a reporter covering these issues for many, many years. There's a legacy history that was sort of maybe kind of true. But during one of those big pivots, what really happened in sort of the 50s and 60s is there were a few people who had their name on a company who went into the Minneapolis club, and 5 or 6 of them said, here's where we're going with downtown. That is not what it is about today. I'm happy they did some stuff. That is great. That is not what is happening today. The only way this happens is with community organizing among an ecosystem of people who are empowered to recognize each one of us can and should do something. So I think we should open it up now for questions and comments on that. But I do also want people to do it with the frame of think through what you can do. Where was the person whose wife was working on signage with the Downtown Residents Association? Thank you for your wife doing that great work. Now, who's going to be the person who's going to make sure we do signage so that somebody can come out of the IDS when they're visiting town and know how to get to the Walker Arts Center? Build on that work, okay? So that's basically what I'm talking about. So let's open it up for any kind of questions or comments that somebody wants to have. Oh, David, go ahead.
When you talk about repurposing office buildings, is there past precedent for artists, porters, nonprofits? Is there space for that and experience in doing that?
Great question. So I don't know how much the microphones pick up or how much you heard. Question was, as people think about converting office buildings to some other use, is there precedent for including artists and others in that thinking? Is that fair? Great question, right? A successful city, I think it's true, needs a wide variety of people, including incomes, including pursuits, including ages, including races, like living together. That's what makes it a place that people want to be, right? Doesn't have to be in every building, but it shouldn't be in no buildings. At the moment, that's a tricky thing to figure out, mostly because of financing, right? It's expensive to buy, it can be kind of expensive to buy an office building or a piece of land, and then typically a profit-minded person wants to make as much money as possible by renting for as much money as possible, right? So there are some nonprofits who are pursuing it. Minneapolis and St. Paul both have affordability requirements for projects that happen at all. I believe Minneapolis has exempted downtown conversions of office buildings to residential from the affordability requirements for some period of time to get projects to happen. What I'm describing, I think, is a tension between what I think we'd all agree is a good thing, if not the right thing, to make sure that the housing that's created, the uses created, are affordable and accessible to a wide variety of people, and that the market is pulling in kind of a different direction and government is trying to go like this. So to be determined is the answer at the moment.
Let me also say that Minneapolis is blessed with the best artist housing developer in the country, art space. We've talked to them about that, and we've said the Minneapolis Foundation could step up and do an early grant if we can figure out the right opportunity. I say that also to say that one of the things that we're looking at doing at the Minneapolis Foundation is, does anybody remember Barbara Flanagan, the wonderful columnist who for years wrote about downtown? Cafes and others, yeah. Barbara was very dear to me, and when she died, we started something called the Barbara Flanagan Fund. It's a little fun, but we use it for different ideas. So if you care about that or any of these other ideas, you can make a contribution to the Minneapolis Foundation's Barbara Flanagan Fund, and if we find the right situation for artist housing, we're going to make a grant to that. Go ahead.
Are there other cities that we can use as a model that have been in a similar situation and how they negotiated their way through it?
The question is, are there any other cities that we see as a model? I believe there are many cities that have done some innovative things, but the moment we are in right now is rarely do you have every city in the country/world looking at what to do with their office core. And many of the things that we beat ourselves up about trying to figure out, we're blessed to have lots of other people doing things. So, you know, like one magazine I read a lot is Monocle. I don't know if you ever see it. It comes out of London, but it's really about cities. And it's every single issue has examples of cities repositioning. So I honestly can't say that. I would say what I'm looking for is simply to do the simplest thing in the world, which is to take the live-work neighborhoods that have emerged around the outskirts of the office core and simply bring that into the core. It's much easier to simply take what is already happening a few blocks away than to try to imitate London or Melbourne or whatever else. And that's really all we have to do. Historically, downtown was the thing and it was surrounded by nothing. Now the things surrounding downtown is filled in with the sort of live, work, 24/7 multicultural neighborhoods we want. So all we need to do is look a few blocks away and have that seep into the core as the core seeped out before. Go ahead. Talk about your work too.
Hi everybody, my name is Abby Gonzalez. I am the executive director of the newly formed arts department for the city of Minneapolis. So I wanted to just address the question that you posed, and while our department is really new, I'm new to the city as well, and I'm here to just learn from everybody and the wonderful work that's been happening in downtown and building on that. We have a mayoral directive called the Vibrant Storefronts, and so the city has a small fund right now to act as a matchmaker, basically between empty commercial spaces downtown and arts organizations and artists really. And we're helping. That fund is going to help subsidize the rental costs for artists, and we're looking at this not as a pop-up activation, but more as a pathway for creative entrepreneurs to activate downtown in artistic and cultural ways that are site-specific and site-responsive to what's happening right now. So I invite anybody that wants to learn more about what the city is doing to reach out to me and our department. The director of the department, his name is Ben Johnson, and the executive manager, and yeah, we're just getting started, so I'm happy to connect with anybody that's interested in our work.
Thank you. Did I see it? Go ahead. You can speak up. Yeah.
One of the things I believe the report was talking about was the age-old issue of skyway level versus street level, and how the skyways maybe have sucked some of the vibrancy out of the downtown area because everything is invisible, and transforming that so that might serve a different function. Could you talk a little bit about that? That's kind of an intriguing question.
I use skyways a lot. I like them. I don't like what they have done to street life. If every single business in the skyway went down to the street right now, boom, we would have an extraordinarily vibrant city. And so it's a real tension. That's a private system. It's not a public system. You can't control it. I do think we ought to rethink the skyway from being 60 blocks. I don't know how many miles. I've heard the numbers. They're huge. And think more about what is the skyway highway we need, meaning to get from here to there, what can be open maybe many more hours, and de-emphasize these others. I would encourage the city to use every possible zoning strategy they could to bring folks down. And we've also talked to the public officials about trying to do incentives to move folks down. David, or do you guys, yeah.
I just want to say there's a theme in the report that is kind of getting to what you're saying, which is focusing uses. Because as we look to bring in a broader diversity of people, one of the prime demographics that could really find community here are older adults. And in people that may or may not have a disability, and the skyways in the winter can make life possible. You can still navigate and get to where you need to go, but not have to be exposed to the elements. So to the point of the skyway highway, it's too valuable an asset to turn our back on. And it's also a great opportunity to place those retail or those customer-facing businesses that are destinations. Your dentist, your dry cleaner, your bank, service-oriented things, and leave that for kind of that intentional commerce, and then leave the street level for discovery and delight. Shopping, browsing, restaurants, where a visitor might never need to go up to the skyway, but a resident would use both. So I
also think people should start voting with their money. I've been in so many conversations with people about, oh, gee, why aren't there more businesses on the street? Have you been to the Banh Mi shop down here? Have you been to Zalo since it reopened? By the way, it's pretty darn crowded, but I've been in conversations, oh, I would never go to Zalo. Have you been to the Dakota? So we need to really put our money where our mouth is. I'm looking at fellow travelers here, but carrying that message to others. I am so sick of being in conversations with people about, oh, none of my friends go downtown. No, actually, all of your friends are talking to each other. The rest of us are having a good time downtown. So, yeah, anyways, go ahead.
On the kind of piggyback on that, not the structural issue about perceived crime, but it seems like perceived crime has gone way up. And I don't mean the real statistics.
Yeah.
And it's a soft effort, a PR effort. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you do it after you get some of the new structural issues going. But to me, that thing of talking about oh, I wouldn't go downtown. You haven't been downtown in 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's that perceived crime which drives me nuts, because I don't think it's that bad. But,
this is an extraordinarily important point about perceived crime and real crime. There are safety issues, no doubt about it. Here, other places, there is no doubt about it. There is also no doubt about the fact that it is much safer on raw data and everything else than it was a couple of years ago. None of us should look for some big campaign to win that over. That's not how people get it. It is 100% sitting at that dinner party where my wife does not want to go to dinner parties with me anymore, because when somebody says, oh, I'm so afraid to go downtown, I feel her stepping on my foot, and this is why I have a foot injury now currently. This is my wife, and the fact of the matter is, we own the ability to disrupt it. You are totally right, and we just have to get in people's face about it. One of the things, though, is in this dialogue about safety, rightfully there's an enforcement part, but I spent a fair amount of my life trying to work on safety issues, and the interplay between enforcement and activation has been wildly imbalanced. We've talked to death the idea about enforcement. We are now also needing to really lean into animation. Go ahead.
David, I was kind of caught by your story and raising a family downtown. And I know of families that have tried to raise their family downtown and they have challenges with that. I'm just wondering if your perspective on how to make downtown more of a family-oriented environment.
Thanks for that question. That's fun. I promise that was one of the things I was ready to talk about. Thanks, Tom. So we moved downtown from the other side of the river when our daughter was 6 or 7. And she was nervous that her friends would not want to come over to play, right? So they come over to our condo building and there's like a pool table in the community room and they're like, we're coming here every time, right? So like that got taken care of. Later she went to De La Salle. It's probably a mile walk, and she said, there's like, when it gets cold enough, you'll drive me, right? And amazingly, even back when we used to have winter, it never got cold enough. I would say there are some infrastructure things, right? Like we were able to make do with a 2-bedroom, probably at that time could not have afforded a 3-bedroom if there were any to buy, right? Like cities everywhere wrestle with like, if you need a room and then maybe another and another, like you're now talking about a big enough price that younger people can't afford it, and that's a problem. Not sitting here saying I have a solution, but that is a problem. I happen to have been around when my lovely wife and others led the fundraising for what's now a fantastic playground on West River Parkway and 4th, right, where there are kids all the time, even in the winter. Like there are kids there. So the school thing has been somewhat addressed, right? Like I still wish that there was a walkable for a young person school that downtown residents could send their kids to. There is a school, it is for downtown, but like I wish that there were one that was as close as the one I walked to when I was a kid. And I'd say it's just one of those things that over time becomes more acceptable because you know people who have done it, right? When you know somebody who grew up in an apartment, then it's less weird that people might raise kids in an apartment. Just it's one of those things that will take some time, and there's some things the public could do, right? Like encourage development of bigger apartments, maybe with some affordability, not sure. A school, playground, things that kids enjoy doing, but we loved it.
I think there's a tension, it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. Like, do you need the families to live in downtown to make the school and the grocery store and the playground and the daycare to make all those businesses come? Or will they move downtown or stay downtown because those businesses are here? And I think, we're talking about creating a ecosystem of community that includes all those services so that you can live here and you can stay with your kids. And that is developing. I remember the development of the Lunds over by, who lives by Eli's, over there. Remember those, those apartments over there? It felt like they were hanging off the edge of the earth, but now there is a real community there. And I would argue that that grocery store is an anchor to it. So that's not an answer, but just a point that, if it takes pioneers like David and his family with the covered wagon and everything, demonstrating that it's possible and demonstrating the need for those kind of services and businesses to come in.
More comments, questions?
I think we have.
Go ahead, Tom. Tom, and then you.
David and Beth, what are the policy changes that you think need to be made to enable your report to be realized? What are some of the barriers that we have in place that need to be overcome? Any thoughts?
Thanks for that question, Tom. Instead of starting with policy changes, I would hope that there are people, some of them work for the government and some don't, who would pick up pieces of the things that will make life better for everyone who we want to visit and those of us who live and new people who we want to move downtown and office workers and own it, right? So like not only in the way that R.T. and Beth and I are encouraging everyone here to like work on it, but also people who are in a position to say, I am going to organize a group and we're going to work on this and we're going to see if we can make it happen, right? I think that's, to me, that's a key message from our report, that if we wait for the same 15 organizations and 100 people to do it, like they have a long list, right? Like if some new people could grab some of it and go with it, we'd get farther along.
Talk a little bit about Erin And the
Oh, yeah.
Renaissance group and
Yeah.
how, like, that's an
So-
amazing thing.
Yeah, longtime friend, colleague, a woman named Erin Fitzgerald, who works now at JLL, of her own, speaking of, went to this mayor, went to Mayor Fry and said, Mayor, like, the data is terrifying, right? Here's when the office building loans are coming due. Here's how much occupancy is in each of those buildings. Here's what their valuations are going to be, and like, we have a problem. And I wasn't there, but I'm told Mayor Fry said, can you help? And that led to what is now a 50-person meeting once a month with subcommittees thing called the Minneapolis Renaissance Coalition group, not sure, the Renaissance thing that Erin is running. See me afterwards if you want to find out how to sign up to be involved. So it's a group of what you'd hope, right? It's government and it's private sector and it's designers and it's finance people and it's developers
real estate
and
people.
service people who get together and say, what can we help spur into happening, right? So like there to me is an example of someone who concerned, took an assignment and is doing something.
That's the ecosystem. One other thing, policy changes, the Metropolitan Council oversees Met Transit. We need Metro Transit to agree to move the buses to Marquette and 2nd. Mike Rainville, who's the council member from this side of downtown, has been very active on that. Those of you who are in that area should contact him and thank him for great work on that. Katie Cashman, who represents this area, came into a brand new job with multiple things to do. She immediately sat down with us, heard about the report, liked all of that. She wants to go back and get feedback from residents about whether they're comfortable, those of you especially in Loring Green and that sort of thing. Let her know that you support the idea of activating Nicollet Mall. There's no strategy we can really do that we're talking about on Nicollet without the buses moving to Marquette and 2nd where they belong. So encourage them. That would be a piece of that. I'm sorry, right over here. You and then you. First two, yeah.
Yeah, probably piggybacking a little bit on Tom's question. So I went from walking with my dad down in front of Moby Dick's years ago, probably dated myself, to now walking my children around the bridge in the Northland area. So the transition has been just wild to see. So maybe a two-part question. I guess in that, how is the young person's voice showing up in this work, in this cultivated configuration? And two, if those property tax dollars are being pooled and dispersed elsewhere, is there something we can do to kind of keep that money in our area, in our programs, in our downtown district? How does that work?
Let me take the second part and then move to the other. I think like about 20 years ago, downtown carried about 60% of the city's property tax base. There was some change that lowered the commercial industrial property tax. It went down to like 40-ish or something like that. It's going to go way down from that. And so it's not necessarily that people are taking money from downtown, because the public has never spent, the city government has never made big investments in downtown. I'm going to give you an exception from that. So it wasn't that there's money being taken from it. It's that the cash cow isn't delivering as much cash. The only exception to what I'm saying is there's been very big public involvement in redevelopment using tax increment financing, which basically said when City Center was built, for instance, it was the ugliest building in town, but it was a cash cow for the city. And what they said with that is that when the developer came in and said, we're going to build this, 46-story building or whatever, and it's going to generate so much more taxes, but we're going to need a little investment up front. So they used some of the increased taxes, the tax increment, to pay for that. But it was so lucrative that they refinanced it, and it funded the entire neighborhood revitalization program for the city, that and the Radisson Hotel, if I've got my facts, if I'm remembering all this right. I tell that because what can be done is that we are at a moment where tax rates are going to go very low. And if we do all this right, tax rates are going to come up. So the ability of the city to use tax increment again, I was the person more than anything else, Lisa Goodman and I, who said stop doing so much tax increment. I am now saying start doing tax increment, okay? And the reason for that is that when value is low, if you capture the growth and put that into this works. There are also all sorts of technical things, but there's a piece of property down on Nicollet at about 15th, a bunch of meters there, the city owns it. There's a quirk in state law that we got in. If something gets built there, all that new tax money can be used for some of these investments in a way that other property can't. So there's some tools that can be used. Now how young people are involved in the thinking. And then I probably should turn to the YMCA person who could also answer that you're going to return Saturday programming for young people. Good. Okay.
All right. Well, let me just say thank you so much for that question, because that is something that as we were batting around ideas and saying what we needed to have in the report, the youth voice was absolutely at the top of the list. I think the trick there is how. And how, you know, youth are by nature transitory, right? You were young and now you're not so young. But
I'm so
except for you. How do we capture that? And how do we make the youth feel like downtown is for them, when for decades that has absolutely not been the case? There has been active shutting out of kids, because kids having fun look to some like safety problems. And so opening our eyes and seeing the value in the youth voice, because frankly, everything that we do, it's not going to benefit us. It's going to benefit the generations behind us. We're thinking about a city, to use Tom's kind of historical timeline. The things that we do today are going to be realized, and the benefits realized in 10 years and 15 years, 20 years. And so it behooves us to try to create the fertile ground and have youth engage. How? I do not know. And it's a quandary. Maybe you can speak to that.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I would love to say not only the youth, but I heard the senior population pop up as well. That actually is one of our most growing on our line. Right down the road, being also at 6th and Nicollet, you know.
Can you introduce it? Let everybody know where you work.
Yeah, so we're at the Y at Dayton YMCA on 6th and Nicollet. So right on, you know, where we would love to beautify the space right outside. The transportation does come out because, of course, public transportation is how many of our people do get to our Y. So to move that, parking is a thing, you know, and I know those barriers. But overall, we have a ton of capacity, and we were built really. It's a new building. We built it in 2018 for the generations to come. So it isn't that you know, the whole feel of a Y. So I think when we talk about the transient of it, you know, it has a future trajectory already in the space. So there's a ton of opportunity on weekends, especially when we think about the Skyway. Though we're at first, second, all the way up to rooftop, right? So the Skyways and the access is tricky because we oftentimes they're locked down when everyone wants to play, right? So they want to come to the Y have time. The weekends you can't get in. You have to go on Nicollet and try to hold the doors open. So there's a lot of that we want to work around, but we are ready. We are positioned to help to be that convener really for the city. And I hear about both your families, and we'd love to.
Yeah, the thing that I you know, I didn't mention up top is, I guess I did very quickly. I was a fortunate kid whose mom taught him to take the bus. We came downtown, and every single Saturday went to that Y. It's relevant especially because I had a place that I belonged downtown. And I also went to a place where, from my almost all-white neighborhood in southwest Minneapolis, had meaningful experiences with kids of other races and other backgrounds from other part of town, met them. We then wound up going to camp together and others. and it was a great place. There was a place for me downtown, and as I got a little older, then I would go to Music Land, and we'd go, you know, buy records and buy incense and posters, and we would probably now, I don't know, I won't go any further, but then later I'd go to Moby's, you know, where that was at. So the fact of the matter is, are we growing a generation that is involved in cities? I don't know about that. And you know, think about the demographics and the psychographics of this region. Minneapolis has been an attractor of young talent from a huge range. If you think of it like a watershed, we go, you know, into the Dakotas, into Montana. We bring all these young people in. We also bring in disproportionately, especially historically, many LGBTQ members, people of other backgrounds who came into this city and felt welcome. Right now, this is not a youth downtown. It is not a youth-centered downtown. And we need to look in the eye of, are we raising a generation that will have the same experiences? This is the moment. So for instance, if somebody wants to go to the YMCA and say, start redoing your Saturday morning programming for kids, maybe you should put out a call and see if you can get a funder to do that, because I'm telling you, there is nowhere that welcomes a kid. Follow a black teenager through downtown Minneapolis and look at the messages they get and ask yourself, should that kid feel welcome? And the answer in my mind is no, and that's deeply wrong. Can we go ahead.
Well, I want to say, when I moved to Minneapolis, and I've been here a couple times, I wanted to live downtown. I moved from New York City. I had a dog, a very large dog, and 2 kids, and no one would rent to me or anything in downtown Minneapolis, so I had to find someplace else, which I think it's changed. You know, my last name is Urban for a reason. I'm going to live in the city. But, you know, now my kids, you know, so we found a place as close as possible to downtown, because I wanted to live downtown, and like you, I knew how to bunk my 2 kids high in a 1-bedroom apartment, and so it wasn't uncomfortable. That is not the case of my upbringing, and where you had a lot of spaces and outdoors. But I brought my kids downtown every weekend, and they did razor scooters through the Skyway in the wintertime on the edges, because, you know, they were open. And I've been also thinking of moving. I don't live very far away. I live, you know, southwest Minneapolis, 3 miles from downtown, and I like to work sometimes, and I take the bus, and I drive a car, so I feel the city has everything, and I'm just a little concerned about the fact that my kids takes the bus downtown, and that was 20 years ago. They're in their 30s right now, and they, like their friends, didn't. So I think we have a whole generation that isn't coming downtown, and they're young adults, and so I don't know how to say that, but I'd like to bring them back, and I think that's so important. You know, they went downtown to the Y, you know, all the things that you're talking about, and we've lost a lot of that. They went skating on TV Plaza. That's where the ice rink used to be, you know, at lunchtime. People
one of the
skating
things
on that.
you know, one path at this is to look at when we are attracting young people. So for music, First Avenue, for instance, or for sports or others, we are attracting. So this is where this whole idea about what attractions do we build that extend that visit. So there are some things underway that we're working on that. This is the sort of stuff we would do, these targeted grants out of the Barbara Flanagan Fund or something. But we're going to be very involved in that, because I want them to come to the concert, but I want them to come to something just a little more and then come back to that. And so we're working on it. Go ahead, David.
Christine, did I see that you wanted to?
Yeah. Oh, Christina, can you also introduce, this is one of the, not only a board member, which you didn't raise your hand, Christina Lee, but one of the great entrepreneurs. Will you share with them what you've done?
Can you speak up?
Yeah.
Yeah, we develop a lot of restaurants in the airports, and restaurant, Eat Street Crossing,
Eat Street Crossing, okay.
and Porzana.
And Porzana.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of some of our background.
Thank you for both of those. I personally. extremely delicious.
Christina's family are immigrants who came to this country. Her husband, Ben, is also from an immigrant family, and they're some of the most successful entrepreneurs in our town. Great people. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so parking, if we could come up with a plan where all building owners can collaborate and help solve that issue, we can really entice the business owners to come, especially the minority business owners. That would be the first thing that they'll say to us when we talk to them about coming in. I think many of them are very interested to do business and see opportunity. And we thank you, R.T. and everyone here, to invite us and to come to this meeting, to have a voice and to be able to help build the fabric of our downtown. So this is really exciting and important. So I think that we can bring in more people to do this. So if we can solve that parking issue as a collaborate, that's one. And secondly, the other question I had is, when you were doing the study, and the vision is to convert from commercial spaces to residential, we're going to lose that income, property tax income, the city. So where would we find that income to help subsidize this shortfall? Because this is a densely populated space that we are planning for. So that's something to think about too. Yeah.
Thank you. Let me take on the parking one. When I used to work at the Downtown Council, I'd cringe when people would ask me about parking. Not anymore. Parking is now going to be one of the assets of downtown. So first up, there are a lot of parking spaces in the city now, and they can be used differently. There is not yet the coordinated strategy that we need to get there. So for instance, 5 years ago, I went to the IDS and I said, you charge $5.25 after 5 o'clock. That's pretty good, but you're pretty empty. So I convinced them to charge $5, 5 after 5. It's memorable. So now you look at the rest of the downtown, and every single office building has a huge amount of parking day and night. So certainly instituting a 5 after 5 is a strategy that we could have, but there's also, we're in the middle, we now pay for a lot of parking for our employees, and there's a whole different model going. There's a ton of parking here. And the beautiful thing is you're climate controlled. Like, I always go to the Target downtown, not only because I always go downtown, but because on that cold winter day where you're walking across the windswept Target parking lot, not downtown, you park in climate control, you leave your coat in the car. Same thing with all of these different things. So the Skyway thing plays a role in the parking piece, and this is where I really encourage the Downtown Council to take that on, because we should have a coordinated, simple parking. It doesn't take a big, complicated system. Just give predictable rates and direct people to where there's openings. So let's take one more quick one, and then we'll go ahead, David.
As part of the ecosystem and part of the perception of crime, can you update us on what's going on with our police force, and how are they going to replenish the ranks, and how long will that take?
Yeah, that's a very good and huge question. I'm no longer the mayor, so I'm not going to be able to answer all of that.
Despite all impressions to the contrary.
But
Anyone knows you.
yeah, but I'll say one thing, that there are real challenges with police everywhere these days. Certainly this week, it's a pretty sad day, and having been through the shooting of a couple of police officers, I recognize how vulnerable officers feel after that. And it's a huge issue. the good news on it is Minneapolis has, I believe, the best police chief we've had in the last 20 years. I don't know when we've had a better police chief. I think he has terrific potential and he's doing really good things. So I'm not going to be able to, in a minute or two, give you the answer to that. But I can say we've got the right person leading it. And I think Judge Barnett, who's overseeing public safety, is also equally good. So that's the best I can do on that one. Let me just first off say thank you so much for people for coming and being active in this conversation. And let me also thank you in advance for not thinking this is a one and done. I hope everybody in this room is thinking about things they can do. If there's absolutely nothing you can think of doing, if you think you don't have any ability to do anything, then make a contribution to the Barbara Flanagan Fund, $1, whatever, and we will spend it by investing in things like artist housing or activating Nicollet Mall or something like that. And the people in this room have tremendous capacity to do incredible things. And we don't need one hero to do this. We need everybody to be engaged and to care about. This is our common ground. More than any other place except the walkways around the lakes and rivers, which I would say is absolutely the town square of this town. This is the place that people come together from out the whole region. And this is the place that we need to win the ability to have common ground that we all share and we all love. And we're at a moment where we can either give that up or we can, as Tom say, move on to the next better future that we have. I believe we're ready for that. And I just want to thank you so very much for being here and to continue the conversation. And by the way, next time you're at a dinner party, tell the person to come on downtown with you and bring them to say hello. Good. Thank you all very, very much. Hang around and eat some food.
Can I just say a quick word? I'm feeling kind of moved. Thank you, R.T., for bringing together this dialogue, because I don't know about you guys, but this feels so refreshing and positive. Here are a bunch of like-minded people. We all care, and it makes me feel optimistic about the future. And you've always said to me that this is a civic town, and it is. And let's lean into that. Let's, you grab two friends, I'll grab two friends, and that's how we shift the narrative. That's how we shift the paradigm. So thank you, R.T., for the dialogue.